This is Alan Stewart with B&B Yacht Designs, and I'm here today with my Corsound 17 southbound. It is late August 2022, and we're getting ready to sell this boat. If you're watching this, I think the boat's already sold, so don't contact me about it, but I'm making this video to document the boat a little bit. I wanted to do a tour of it and also to show all of the things on the boat that are stuff that I've done to it since I've had it, and a lot of things that, you know, I kind of always wanted to do and never got around to doing. So this boat was built by Ken Potts in 2003, and he painted it yellow, and when I got it I eventually refinished it and took it all the way back down to epoxy and repainted it. But he did all this really nice hatch bright work, and on the thwart and the coaming and the foredeck hatch and also the tiller. So I can't take any credit for any of that, but I did paint it white, and I repainted the cockpit, and I did quite a bit of work inside. I had to redo some of the seat tops because there was some damaged wood. Eventually I had to redo the keel batten by the trunk, and I also added an outboard well, and I have pictures of that on the forum. Let me stand back here and show you the rig. I have the original rig, and my sails are hollow cut, meaning they have no battens, and they're sleeve luff, so there's no track and there's no halyards, and the sails roll up around the masts when you store the boat. So there's good and bad about this. The good is the boat is very fast to rig. The sails are already on the masts, and you just drop the masts in the holes, and you unroll them around the mast and you install the sprits. It's very fast and easy. The bad is that reefing is pretty much, you just don't. So it is possible to reef, and maybe I'll throw some pictures of that in, but the reefing is accomplished by partially rolling the sail around the mast, and you see this patch here and there's another one here. You roll about a third of the sail up onto the mast, and then you tie. I've got a line hanging off the other side of the sail on, well, I did, but there's the patch, I think on the mizzen. So you roll it up and then you tie that around the mast, and that becomes the new snotter attachment. And so the sail ends up kind of bagged out on one tack, and tight on the other tack. So it's kind of weird, but it does work, but it's very awkward. The other way to reef, of course, is to take the mizzen sail down completely and move the main mast into the third mast hole. And you often hear about this third mast hole, and I'll show it to you from the inside. But on the newer boats, we don't really worry about the third mast hole, because with the sail track and the slab reefing, it's so much easier to reef the boats that moving the main mast back to the third mast position it really isn't necessary anymore. On the trailer, we get asked this a lot, but you know, what trailer should I get for my boat? And you can see my trailer is well short of the boat. I've got like 4 foot of boat sticking behind the trailer, and there's a good reason for that. If you go try and buy a trailer for a 17-foot boat or an 18-foot boat, the market is flooded with powerboat trailers. And powerboats have heavy outboards on the back, so you're going to end up with a trailer where the wheel is way back here, so you're going to have a ton of tongue weight, and that's okay as long as you can move the axle. But a lot of times you can't move the axle, but you're also going to end up with a trailer that's designed for a boat that's maybe thousands of pounds more than you need. This boat weighs, 500 pounds rigged, and so you end up with a very stiff ride for the boat. So this trailer is actually more like a John boat trailer. You might fit a 12-foot power boat on it, for example. And this trailer also has an adjustable axle, but it is leaving a lot of boat hanging off the back of the trailer. And this really just doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. This is also a narrow trailer, so I'll show it to you from the front. The wheels and fenders are fully under the chines, and it does make the boat real easy to maneuver because it's so narrow. You don't have to take real wide turns. It is a little trickier to back it because it turns quicker than a wide trailer, but I like it, and the boat's light enough that I never get the trailer wet. My wheels are far enough forward that I back my trailer until the wheels are just barely touching the water, and then I just push from the bow and it rolls off on the rollers, and the trailer never gets wet. So this is the kind of trailer I prefer, but some people like the trailer to come all the way to the end of the boat, and that's fine, but you're gonna expect to get a heavy-duty trailer designed for a power boat unless you have it custom made, and it's probably also going to be a fairly wide trailer. But some people like that, and some people are in fresh water and don't mind dunking their trailers. In saltwater, we try not to dunk our trailers for our small, lightweight sailboats. So that's just a quick thing about the trailer. So I repainted the boat, and I used All Grip 545 primer, which is our standard go-to primer. And on this boat I painted everything with Duveau 379 2-part gloss polyurethane, and it's hard to buy at the moment, but other builders have had good success with it, and we've recommended it. It's a little harder to use than All Grip because it tends to tack off faster, but this boat was painted maybe 6 or 7 years ago. It's still just as glossy as it was when I painted it. It's a very hard wearing paint, and so I got all white, and then you can see the bottom is gray, which is the same paint, but I added graphite powder to it to make it two-tone. And then in the cockpit I made a slightly lighter gray, also with graphite powder. And so unfortunately this is a color that could probably never be matched unless you took like a hatch with you or something. But that's how I got white, light gray, and then dark gray for the bottom. And so this is all Duveau 379. The hull was sprayed, and the cockpit and the decks I rolled and tipped. And if you look real close, you get, you can see some of my brush marks in the deck, and there's a close-up of that corner. And there's a couple of spots where there's some runs, like there's my worst run right there under these cleats. But that's just a quick note on my paint job, and then of course these are just varnished. So I guess I'll go ahead and I'll do the stern, and then I'll get in the boat. So here's my rudder. I've got an uphaul line that, and all my lines really need replacing. You can see there's some bad chafe right here on this eye strap. This really ought to be a fair lead, but I've got an uphaul line that goes to a little clam cleat underneath the tiller right here. I've got a battle stick tiller extension. I like these because they extend out, and they're really lightweight, and you just twist them to extend them. If you don't have a tiller extension, you really should get one. I didn't have one for the longest time, but with this one I can sail all the way sitting in front of the thwart. I can sit all the way up there. And also, if you want to hike out, you can't hike out without a tiller extension. And for my downhaul line, I have The downhaul line comes out the top of the rudder head here and it's connected to a length of bungee, which by now needs replacing. It's starting to get a little old. And I like the downhaul line going to a cam cleat. So there's my downhaul cleat, and that's how I hold the rudder down with bungee tension. And I went through this in great detail on my 17 Mark III tour video. So this is how I like to do the rudder downhauls. Now, I also trailer my boat with the rudder attached. So this is, you see the rudder hanging on the boat just like it is. This is how I trailer it. And finally, I added a 1/4 inch bolt that goes right through the rudder blade and the cheek. And I drilled a hole and I epoxy bushed it. And I've just got a 1/4 inch bolt and I just spin that on and it doesn't come off by the time I get to the ramp. And I did that because otherwise you're relying solely on the uphaul cleat. And and I didn't like to do that, so I put the bolt in there. It makes me feel better when I'm trailering. Even though the rudder blade doesn't touch the ground when it's on the trailer, I still like to know that it was secure. So this is how I trailer it. And yeah, it sticks back another couple of feet, but getting this into the car with all the other stuff you're going to take boating it is just too much of a pain in the butt. So of course you can put the rudder assembly in the boat, but then you have to worry about setting it on something so it doesn't get dinged up and so forth. So last thing on the rudder, I don't have a tiller clutch on this boat, although I would add one eventually. But what I settled on is, you see this line here goes from one side of the cockpit to the other, and I've got a little taut line hitch here, and this just does one wrap around the end of the tiller. So when I'm trailering, I just wrap this around the end of the tiller handle and I just cinch this up, and I bend the tiller down just slightly, and that holds my tiller. And that has worked for me, but yeah, I would eventually add a tiller clutch. And I would do the tiller clutch so that it did double duty as rudder stops, because there's a tiny little bit of damage on the transom on either side of the lower gudgeon where the head of the bolt has pushed in a couple times, and that would be solved with rudder stop. So that's pretty much, that's it for the rudder. On the motor well, I have a bunch of pictures of that on the forum, which I'll link to below. And I've got a piece of starboard here on the outside, and that protects the wood from the outboard clamps. You can see the clamps there. This was designed to fit my Tohatsu 3.5 horse short shaft, and the short shaft just barely fits underneath the edge of the transom, so that you can spin the motor around for reverse. So it's a tight fit for a short shaft, but I didn't want to have a long shaft. But I used to have boat came with a rudder outboard clamp that was just a 2x6 bolted to the transom, and that works great. And you just clamp the outboard up top above the transom, but it is a lot higher and it gets in the way of the mizzen sheet more, and you have to use a long shaft to make that work. But it was a lot easier than this. But I switched to this because I wanted a short shaft and I wanted to lower it down. Also, you can kind of see here with the mizzen sheets, it's asymmetric. I've got a fair lead on the starboard side, but on the port side, I never reinstalled the fair lead after I did the outboard well, because obviously the sheet can't go like that. So I just let the sheet go straight to over here to the mizzen cleat, and I never did any more than that. Really, it should have another fair lead here, because sometimes if I uncleat it, the sheet will get all the way back to the block, and then you have to reach all the way back to the block from the cockpit to get it back into the cleat. So could use a fair lead there, maybe even one to direct it around the outboard well if you were gonna keep doing it that way. Okay, I'm in the aft part of the cockpit here where you would sit to drive, and I'll show you a few features of the boat. So Ken built the aft deck version of the 17. So I have a bulkhead in the back of the boat, and the back about 2 foot of the boat is all one big hatch. And I thought it'd be clever one year to design a way to lock this hatch down without any visible hardware. So I designed this string, and you pull this string and it releases the hatch, and then the hatch comes up. And the way that works is the string operates a little hook here with a bungee, and that hooks onto a pin, and then there's a fiberglass batten that makes it pop up. And I don't know, I thought that was kind of cool. There's no gasket on this hatch, but when the boat's on its side, like if you capsize, the water's way up here. So this is a very dry space. We throw our sleeping bags, all the stuff we want to keep dry when we're camping, we throw it in there. And this is a huge amount of volume in here. You can fit a lot of gear. And so we try not to put too much heavy stuff back here, because you want to keep weight out of the back of the boat. But you can also see the outboard well addition that was glued up inside there. And you can see Ken painted the inside of the locker. We don't do that usually, but he did. But there's no damage anywhere. Everything has stayed dry, and there's a few little epoxy drips here and there, but nothing structural that is an issue. You can see the stern eyes there where they bolt through, and some tape here and there where there were bolts and stuff. Maybe a little bit of yellow paint left over from when it was originally yellow. So that's the stern hatch, and the mizzen sheet is the classic lateral clam cleats from Sea Dog. This is how it was originally meant, and these still work great. This is a 5/16 sheet line, which is plenty for the boat. And there's a tiller extension like I was showing earlier. And the cockpit hatches are standard. This is the original design bungee with a hook, but this bungee has gone. It needs to be replaced. But this is the original hatch design, and it's a little messy in there, but it's not too bad. I installed these hatches back when I redid the boat. It didn't originally have these, and I installed them, and they're built a little differently. Actually, they were built on a mold, and they're fiberglass, but they're the same design. And on the starboard side, I started experimenting with a different hatch latch, and so that's why this one is weird. But it's the same hatch on this side. Again, it's got some epoxy drips and stuff, but no damage is in there. And these stay nice and dry. They do have a gasket. There's a couple spots on the gasket that need replacing, like down in that corner. But you know, if you do capsize the boat, most of the water stays out of these in the amount of time it takes to right the boat. So this latch doesn't really work that great. I'd probably go back to the original or use the latches that we started using on the 17 Mark III. I like them, but they do stick out farther, so if you're worried about them snagging a dry suit or something, you know, you can shop around. But that's the back of the cockpit, and you can see the keel batten here. The bottom is all non-skid with the Duveau 379. It's gotten some staining over the years, but the non-skid is still in good shape. And these are little drain plugs this is another experiment. These are twist drain plugs that you stick in there and twist to tighten. And this hole is right at the very forward end of the cockpit locker. And the idea there was I could wash out the locker and then open these plugs to drain them. And it didn't really work. water got in here just a little bit more than I thought would, so I would just seal these back up. But you can leave them like this, but I was just gonna put epoxy back in those holes and just eliminate these. I thought it would be a good idea, but oh well. So here's the mizzen thwart. It's a nice finish, bright finish thwart, and I did update the mizzen mast step with the fiberglass tube that goes into a plywood step, and the glass tube runs all the way up into the thwart, and it's flush with the top of the thwart, and makes it really easy to step the mizzen mast. And I've got the large Anderson baler here right next to the mizzen mast step underneath the thwart. And so on the thwart we have the centerboard downhaul on a cam cleat right here, and then this line over here is the centerboard uphaul, which is currently all the way in, and I'll get to that later. And then the main sheet on either side here, and again the original sheeting through the lateral cam cleats going to stand-up blocks and to the mizzen sheet block and to the main clew. Sorry, the main clew. And then on the port side we've got some cleats here. The red line is the main downhaul. The blue line is the main snotter, and this outer cleat was used for a mizzen staysail tack line, and basically the mizzen staysail, which I used to have but I sold it because I never used it because we were always just taking the boat to the beach and not racing or anything. But the line went through there, went up to right about there, and went through a fair lead, and then went across the boat and back on the other side. And in that little section across the deck was a figure-8 loop on a bight, and that's what we attached the mizzen staysail tack to. So this cleat here allowed you to move the staysail tack from one rail to the other rail. That was the point of that. So that's why there's 3 cleats. This is the obviously the oar lock socket, and the oars, which I built myself, are stored underneath the rail on both sides, and the handle has a piece of pool noodle on it to protect the try to protect the seat top. This line here just keeps the oar lock from sliding off, and I've got a fiberglass wrap. It's about 6 inches long right here. That is where the oar lock really wears, and we find that to be the best solution for that. And then on the forward end, the blade just fits up inside here under the side deck, and I've got a little dowel right there and a loop of line. So to get the oar out, you take this loop off the dowel, and normally this line just hangs here, and when you want to store the oar, you push it in and you loop that loop over the dowel. And I put the oar lock in front, and it can't touch the deck, so it never rattles and bangs on it doesn't, bang up the seat top. So that's how the oars work on both sides, and they're just flush with the cockpit combing, so they don't bump into your back when you're sitting. So Ken had built these cockpit grates. A lot of people do, and these are newer ones that I built, which are now getting old and probably need redoing again. But there's a few issues with them. They're great for lounging up in the front. My wife really likes them. She can sit across here. They're great for taking out passengers. But one thing I never really fixed was if you step right here, the forward end lifts up. So I'll try to demonstrate that. If you step in the wrong spot, the forward end lifts up. So that's kind of dangerous, and it needs something holding the front end down, like it fits in and then down, and I never got around to that. Also, a couple of these boards have worked loose and yeah, this one needs re-gluing. And there's also a screw, so I think I screwed it at one point just as a stopgap. These need redoing. The other side has the same problem. If you step right here, you're gonna lift the forward end up. So as long as you know that, you just step in front. But I'll show you how these are held. Also, it's kind of hard to get them out sometimes. Well, one-handed. So there's a rail on the side where the trunk is, and then there's 3 support blocks. And so on the underside, there's just some supports like that. So that's what holds it up. And you can also fit these down in there like that. So now that you can just stand on them. So let me do that real quick. So now they're down in the bottom, and this is how you would want them if you had somebody up front sailing. So I'll show you the centerboard. So right now the centerboard's up, obviously. So when I go sailing, the first thing I do when I'm ready to put the board down is I let out the centerboard uphaul and I pull it through the cleat. Pull it all the way through the cleat so that I don't re-cleat it. And you could get one of those 814 anti-recleat covers right here, but I always just do this, and then I'm ready to drop the centerboard by releasing the by pulling in the downhaul. And the downhaul is the classic setup here with the bungee, which I like. This bungee needs replacing, and you can pull the board down. Sometimes you have to reach forward, grab this and pull back to get it to go, because sometimes the bungee will just stretch and it's not enough load to actually drop the centerboard. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the centerboard. I prefer the bungee setup because I like it when it hits the bottom. There's a bungee. I like bungee, but it does need replacing over the years. So I'm trying to lift the board with one hand. Okay, there we go. I also installed these access ports here. These are, I think, 8-inch. And these are nice for airing the boat out. I usually leave them open when I'm storing the boat in the garage so that this tank can dry out. It does get a little bit of water in it when you're sailing, but it's good to have access to this for extra storage if you were going to go on a long trip. So there's one of these on either side. These hatches aren't the best, but you know, they're also not underwater or anything, so they worked fine. So there's one on the port side as well. You can see these are the old school Harkin. I think those are the Harkin Micros. But anyway, there's no springs or anything. What we sell now for this is the Ronstan 201 blocks, which are acetal sheave, not ball bearing. But they both work fine. There's not a lot of loading on this. There's a little bit of yellow paint left on the centerboard from when it was yellow, which I kind of like that because it reminds me that the boat was yellow. And then we have the forward end of the cockpit, and it's pretty deep back in here. You know, I'm reaching all the way in. It's about 18 inches from the forward end of the coaming to where the bulkhead is. So often we'll put our beach chairs under there and our beach umbrella or whatever else we're taking out to the sandbar, and that's a nice good storage place. Also, Ken had a tent cover for the boat that enclosed the whole forward part of the cockpit back to the mizzen thwart, and so for camping you would sleep on these grates, and you put your feet up under the foredeck, and that's also how Graham kind of imagined camping on the boat. So we have done that in the past, but the tent we had wasn't waterproof, so eventually we ended up always just setting up a tent on the beach and anchoring the boat out. That's what we preferred to do. So I'll keep going towards the front, I guess. So there's the third mast position. It goes through the deck, through the seat top, and it goes all the way to the bottom. And there's no step down here because it doesn't need it, because there's not a lot of compression loading, and those two holes hold the mast. I think in the plans there is something shown, but mine doesn't have it. I also have a drain hole there that drains the forward anchor locker back into the cockpit. These are the bottom stiffeners for the forward part of the bottom panel where it's only a 1/4 inch thick. And you can see this white section here, that's primer. I never got around to painting that after I did the repair work on the keel batten. So this is all the Duveau 379 that's tinted gray. And let me pull up this port grate so you can see the work I did. Okay, so at some point the keel batten kind of rotted out on me because it got some water in it and I had to replace it, and I decided not to replace it, and instead I would just put a bunch of fiberglass down. And so if you look at here, you can see right in front of the mizzen mast step there's a ramp here. This is where I had decided to stop the keel batten. This wood was still good, and then I completely removed the keel batten all the way up to the forward bulkhead, and instead I laid down some heavy 17 ounce 2 or 3 layers, I think, of 17 ounce biax glass, and I primed over that, and that's what we used for the season, and that's as far as I got with that repair. So this never got painted. It is stained now because it was just epoxy primer, but the boat didn't live outside, so I never worried about it. So it needs a little repainting. It did get updated with the new O-ring style pin cap. I don't know if there's actually an O-ring on this one. I might have just used butyl rubber, but this is a starboard plastic disc, and the centerboard pin is underneath that, and on the other side it's a fiberglass cap that's permanently glued on there, and of course that needs painting too. But originally there was a plywood cap on both sides, and the problem is if you wanted to get the centerboard out, you had to pry the plywood cap off, and you would always damage it and you'd have to repair it. So we came up eventually with a starboard cap that's sealed with an O-ring, and that's what we use on all the new boats. And so I tried to update this to be more like that. So that's that. And continuing on up here we have the foredeck. Now, one thing that has developed over the years, there's a very thin hairline crack right down the king plank, and if we look underneath, there is the king plank as designed up under there. So it's not a structural issue at all. It's just something about the expanding epoxy joint. There wasn't a piece of fiberglass put right here, so the paint couldn't handle the stresses. So if you don't like to see hairline cracks, you got to sand this down, put a piece of fiberglass tape on it, and then repaint it. That actually was done in the forward section here, but I didn't do it behind this hatch because there was no crack back there. So now there's a crack, so go figure. The forward hatch. People have tried to figure out how to put a latch on these, including myself. And as far as I ever got was putting a bungee across it. This bungee is tired and done, but that's how I held the forward hatch down. It's another one that's out of the water when the boat is on its side if you capsize. And so it's not like it's gonna flood unless you turtle, but there's the forward hatch. There's the mast. The main mast step is down there. This is as designed originally. It's a fiberglass tube. It supports the main mast coming through the deck. King plank there. You can see the bow eye backing screws. And of course it's painted, and the paint has gotten kind of ugly looking over the years, but it's still no structural issues. And there's these are pieces of blue tape that are covering up holes that were filled with epoxy when I put the keel back on, and I never peeled the tape off, so there's no holes there, it's just the tape never came off. And this is a bracket for an anchor that Ken made. Now, I don't have an anchor on the boat right now, but the anchor fits into the top here, and then there's a bungee that was intended to go around the shank of the anchor. And when I did anchor the boat, I would tie the anchor line off to the main mast tube, around the tube, and just the anchor line would just live in the bottom here. And then when I anchored, I would just have the hatch open, run the anchor line out and anchor, and then tie it off to my bow cleat. And that's how I would do it. Ken had a bungee on this, and I think he hooked that on there, and that held the hatch down. I think that's what he did. Oh, I'm missing a screw. I'm missing a screw right there on that little spring holder doohickey. So that's another thing. I've also got a couple of holes here that need epoxy filling from where I used to have an eye strap. That black is from some old electrical tape that was covering the holes, and never got around to it. It's hard to find around to it for me these days. So I'll keep going forward, and then we'll work our way back with the rigging. So the red line is the main downhaul, blue line is the main snotter. And this boat is a little unique in that both of those run to both sides of the deck. So you've got main downhaul, main snotter on both sides, control cleats on port and starboard. And these are just single blocks on an eye strap, and they rattled around on the deck. So I slid a piece of rope in there as a quick and dirty way to keep them from scratching up the deck. So, you know, those might eventually need to be replaced to, you know, Ron stand. We use the 2141s, which are the spring stand-up blocks. But anyway, this worked fine for me. So this here's a mount for a battery-powered red-green bow light that's long been dead, and I haven't used it, and so this, you know, could come off or be replaced or whatever. Got my 6-inch bow cleat on the bow. That's my main anchor cleat. So the main downhaul is connected with this snap shackle here. Real quick to set up. So this just lives on the boat, and then there's the bottom of the sleeve, and I'll come up here to the snotter. Okay, so this boat's a little different. There's no snotter hardware on the mast. Instead, there's just a constrictor hitch around the mast at the top of the sleeve gap, and the snotter is connected via a snap hook directly to the loop of line that is this constrictor hitch on a loop. So that's it. And over the years this will slide down, and then I just slide it back up. But if you're switching to a track mast or something, then you would just have a piece of hardware there. And then snotter's a little different because it's double-sided. There's a double block here going to a single block, and it's a little twisted, and that goes to a loop of line that goes through the fork. So we rarely do it this way these days with the newer snotter attachments for the track mast, but this is, you know, there's so many ways to rig the snotter hardware, and there's nothing wrong with this. It works great, works fine. It is a 2-to-1 because you're pulling on one side at the time, so, you know, 2-to-1 on the main snotter. And that's it. There's no halyard or anything because it's a sleeve luff sail. So it's very basic. And the mizzen snotter is identical. So except that it's not two-sided because of course it goes and stops on the mizzen mast. So there's a constrictor hitch here with a loop, and I hook it with a snap hook, and Beckett block there, single block there, a loop of line through the fork. You'd have to watch this single block. Sometimes it'll get flipped around and then it's not working as a block. So you make sure the snotter is going through the actual sheave part of the block. And then on the mizzen mast, that goes down to the mizzen snotter cleat here. And on the mizzen downhaul, we have a mizzen downhaul cleat with a ball on it. I don't know why there's a ball on it. And goes up to a single block on the mast, and down to, down here to another snap shackle, and that line goes through the thwart with a stopper knot. So this stays on the boat, and when you hook up the mizzen mast, the only thing you have to connect to the boat is you put this snap shackle through this loop of line, and when you have the downhaul tight, that holds the mizzen mast into the boat. So pull the downhaul, and that's the only thing that holds the mast into the boat, which is plenty. And then this cleat here was for the mizzen staysail halyard, which is currently not rigged, but when it was rigged, there was a block hanging off the top of the mast, and the halyard just went straight down and tied off to here when it wasn't being used. So that's pretty much it. That's a tour of the boat, and I think you got a pretty good idea of everything. Like I said, I just wanted this to be a little bit of a documentation of how she was in August 2022, and you know, quite a few things I never got around to, but you know, I think I'd like to put the tiller clutch on the boat. I would like to upgrade to the track sails at some point, and I'd like to fix my grates here, and you know, that's pretty much it. Other than that, she's in good shape. One other detail on the outside, the boat never had a rub rail, and so that's probably something that I would eventually want to add. I probably would use our starboard rub rail. You can see just some video of that in the 17 Mark III tour video, but that starboard rub rail is just so durable, and that's what I would do. I would just screw the starboard rub rail on. Same thing on this side. I got a couple holes there, and you know, my trailer is real short. I have, you know, nothing here, so if that's a problem, then you know, you'd need a longer trailer, but it's never been a problem for me necessarily. Like I said, I was trying to get a small trailer on purpose because I didn't want a trailer that was, you know, more than that needed capacity wise. And well, I already talked about the trailer, and I'll show the bottom here too. I've got 1/2-inch stainless steel hollow back down the stem, and the bottom's in great shape. There's a couple of spots where I have a little epoxy, like right there is a tiny bit of epoxy where it went through, but other than that, you know, the bottom's holding up great. Here's the bottom of the centerboard. Yep, there's still some yellow in there from the original paint job. You can see my roller there. You can see the keel. Bottom's still nice and shiny. It needs a little bit of a scrub, but I couldn't get under there today. And let's look at the other side. There's the drain hole for the mainmast tube, and that is a ding from probably from the anchor. So that's probably needs some epoxy on it at some point, but another one of those get around to it. And nothing really to show on this side. Nothing that needs any attention. So, you know, she's ready to sail. Here she is all rigged up on the trailer, ready to travel, and after I roll the sails up and get the mast down, I use these mast crutches, and there's one here at the mizzen thwart and one at the mizzen, at the main mast, and they're identical, and they support the mast, and the back end is just cantilevered, and that's the top of the mast, so that's totally fine. And as far as holding the mast down, I've got covers on the sails and mast that slip over the rolled up mast. You can see these are kind of worn out, but they're just for sun. At the back, I just put the mizzen sheet right over the two masts and tighten down on the mizzen sheet, and that holds the backs of the masts down. Of course, I got the rudder pinned, and I've got the tiller secured with my line here, and if you're going farther you could tie that up if you wanted, but that's how I usually trailer it. Then in the middle here I've got the main sheet is pinning down the middle of the masts with a little line tied around the masts together, and then the main sheet clips onto that, and that holds the middle. And then at the bow, I use my bow line and I just go over the two masts and wrap it up, and it looks really messy, but it actually doesn't take that long because I'm just kind of looping over and under and over and under over like a figure eight, and it happens pretty quick. And then I've got a little lashing line here at the end of the covers just so they don't go flapping apart, and the sprits are slipped inside the covers, so there's one sprit there and one sprit there, and they can't go anywhere. So then, to keep things from rattling, I take the main snotter line, run it back to here, and I came up one day, I was like, well, I'll clip it onto the top of the centerboard, and that keeps this from flopping around. Now for traveling farther distances, I lash the centerboard, which I've done here. I lash it to the eye strap just so that you don't have to rely on the centerboard uphaul cleat while you're on the trailer. Then I take up the slack on the main downhaul so this block isn't clattering around. And that is it. Now for holding the boat onto the trailer, Ken had built a really nice board that was fitted to the cockpit side decks, went across the boat. It was like a 2x4s with fitted pads here. It eventually rotted and fell apart, and I never rebuilt it, but it's actually, I think, better to have that, and I would build one of those, but it's another one of those round to it. So this is what I've been doing. It's just a regular ratchet strap. It's a good one though. It's a thick one, and I just have an old yoga mat, and I slice a strip off of that. That protects any burning of the paint, and I've had good success doing it this way. And I make sure to cover the chine because the strap goes in below the chine. And I also subscribe to it doesn't need it down there, but I subscribe to twisting straps. If you don't put a twist in it, it'll vibrate. I actually had a stand-up paddleboard strap vibrate so fast on the highway that it melted the strap on the rail of the board. So I always twist my strap. And on this side, the ratchet strap wasn't quite long enough, so I just use a piece of high-tech line here to get my hook up high enough, and that just stays on the trailer. So that's what I've been doing. You could probably save at least 5 minutes on the de-rigging process with some carabiners here and there, and maybe doing it something different. But and then of course I got my winch up on the front here. But that's what I do, and haven't had any issues. The front of the mast is right over the winch, right there, and I'll show you how far it sticks back. The rudder is actually longer than the mast, so there she is, ready to trailer. And like I said, when I launch, I dunk the tires but not the wheels, and then I roll her off the trailer by pushing. And to retrieve her, I do the same thing. I back the tires till they're just the rubber's in the water, and then I bring the bow up to this roller. I bring my winch strap back, hook it onto the bow eye, and start winching, and the stem just rolls up on top of that roller, and you just roll the boat right up onto the trailer. That's how I launch and retrieve the boat, and the trailer has never been in the water. So with that, I think I will end this video here, and thanks for watching. Good job, bud. You driving the boat?